Greetings, ladies and managers, and welcome to the latest edition of RE121, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called The B-Team, written by the Shepherd. The alien mothership drifted down towards a world in flames, seemingly ignorant of gravity. Western Europe was covered in a meter of soot, much of North America was a dust bowl, and Israel and the British Isles were parking lots. Manhattan itself and the UN building was a smoking crater. Pakistan was a wasteland from Peshawar to Karachi, and the parts of India which had escaped immediate annihilation were flooded. China and Russia, what was left of them, were in no shape to support human habitation. Every powerful nation, from Japan to Spain, from South Africa to Germany, was destroyed. Every major government, every modern military base, every missile silo was eliminated. Every satellite in orbit was a cloud of debris. The mothership alighted gently within Mongolia, far away from any civilization, and the aliens immediately emerged and began disassembling its systems to build massive factories. Fuel. They'd come to Earth for fuel. Fuel they could have squeezed from a rock or siphoned from any star or gas giant. But instead, they laid waste to our home. Their first strike was immediate and devastating, and now they went about their business without any concern for the defenseless humans still eking out an existence and what was left of their miserable planet. The UN Security Council was all dead. The highest-ranking American government official still alive was Kentucky's deputy director of the Division of Abandoned Minelands, who had been underground during the strike. And the remaining member nations of the council had fared no better. In an abandoned but oppressive building in the heart of Nur-Sultan, Kazakhstan, it had been abandoned before the strike as well. The brightest minds of what was left of humanity met. The leader of the Canadian government, who had once been the Minister of Canadian Heritage, and extremely proud of how much better what was once Toronto was than what was still definitely currently Detroit, spoke first. She was relieved that there was no longer a need to speak in French. "We are all that's left. We must do something." The Mongolian delegate was still dressed in his road leathers. "Our Harley-Davidson battalion reports that the aliens haven't bothered to set up defenses. We should strike now." As he struck a rich mahogany table with his fist, dust from his jacket flew into the air. His Serene Highness of the Monaco coughed quietly. "This is intolerable," the Portuguese Prime Minister stuttered. "It's almost as if they don't respect us at all." The room responded with nodded heads and hushed murmurs. "Some American tourists were caught in Tijuana during the strike," the Mexican president tentatively offered. "They've offered us the use of potato cannon that they smuggled across the—" He was silenced by the withering glare from the Governor General of the Bahamas, resplendent in her leopard print pantsuit. "We've got tanks," said the Ethiopian delegate proudly. "We just need a way to get them there." The representatives from Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Angola quickly nodded. Even the president of AETHER offered the cautious smile under the circumstances. After quickly conferring with Argentina and Thailand, the president of Egypt spoke. "We can transport them on the deck of our aircraft carriers." The Mexican president, somewhat chastised by their response to his previous comment, seemed raring for a fight. "We don't have any tanks, but I'll be damned if we don't take part in this historic effort. Just give us a way to get to the battle." "We're happy to provide vehicles," the president of Colombia, whose country contained an old Renault plant. "But I want something in return." He looked straight at the Sultan of Brunei, whose Rolls-Royce he'd coveted for years. "Your car." "Absolutely not," said the Sultan, indignant. But after taking the temperature of the room, he considered. "I'll give you a door and 2 quarter panels. Final offer." After thinking hard for a few moments, the president of Colombia shook his head. They had a deal, and the nations of Earth had a plan. The president of Iceland looked with pride at the assembled forces of Earth. Dozens of T-55s and M-47s rumbled across the Mongolian steppe as Fuga Magisters daintily buzzed overhead. The cream of the Chilean and Mexican infantry rode proudly in Colombian Renaults and Filipino jeepneys at the rear of the column, with elite Honduran axe-throwers keeping careful watch from the roofs. Pikemen from the Vatican took up the vanguards on Honda's Super Cubs, graciously provided by Vietnam. Mongolian outriders on Harley-Davidsons watched the flanks, out of the sight but still within earshot of the throaty babble of their engines. As the marvelous army drew within sight of the alien mothership, the Prime Minister of Jamaica couldn't help but bellow, "Charge!" before the eyes of Earth's finest remaining leaders, the last, the best hope of humanity, unleashed heck. With a raspy whine, the pontifical Swiss guard charged slowly towards the enemy into a hail of laser fire. They speared alien drones left and right with their halberds, fortunate that the alien lasers were absorbed by the pristine shades of blue and yellow on their uniform. The T-55s followed them into battle, great diesel engines bellowing smoke into the big Mongolian sky. Aliens began to run before them, deathly frightened by clouds of dirt blown into the air by the shells. The tanks overtook the pikemen in their haste and began to take laser fire themselves. Rivulets of melted metal began to run off their hulls. The supreme head of Malaysia winced as lasers finally drilled through the skin of the T-55s and found its ammo pack, only for nothing to happen. "Do not worry, my friend," chuckled the president of Chad. "We never could afford to buy ammo." The Mongolian Outriders pierced the lines next, fiercely ululating and raking the aliens with AK-47s. The alien retreat had turned into a rout, drones and soldiers ambling back towards the motherships as rapidly as they could work their pseudopods. Magisters from El Salvador supported them, bravely flying low enough to bowl over the aliens with their jet wash. After briefly stalling when the order to charge was given, the motorized infantry of Renaults and Jeepneys came back strong and blew past the tanks and mopeds. As they penetrated the alien factory, the murderous hail of axes from the Hondurans began to take its toll, making a mess of the delicate systems of pipes and valves. A strange alien fluid began to gush onto the Mongolian steppe. "Look, something's happening," shouted the Bangladesh's Deputy State Minister of Liberation War Affairs. Venezuela's Minister of Urban Areas, Agriculture, broadened her eyes as she followed his pointing hand. Half of the alien motherships broke away and stood up on two legs. The great Titan was bristling with weapons in every description. The Groutz's plasma emulated the Swiss Guard. Electrified fire destroyed half of the tank force in an instant. Fierce laser fire, of a slightly different color this time, slaughtered the pride of the Mexican infantry. Mezzan lancers crushed the jeepneys, and Renaults honestly seemed like they broke down sympathetically without ever being targeted by an alien mech. The brave Hondurans stood strong, but their axes clinked ineffectively against the great alien machine's metal skin. Prince Vigo of Moldavia, looking distinctly uncomfortable at being drawn away from his throne of blood, wailed, "We can't touch that thing. We're through." Kentucky's Deputy Director of Division of Abandoned Mine Lands, who had found his way out of the mine and into a fight by disguising himself as the Prime Minister of a small Baltic country, wasn't sure if he'd ever heard of Moldavia. His knuckles turned white as he tightly gripped his pickaxe, which had been made in China. Suddenly, a spirited jeer cut through the sense of despair. A Magister had cunningly distracted the alien Titan by crashing into a tree. The alien war machine turned towards the crumpled wreck of the aircraft and watched in confusion as its pilot crawled away. A Greek M47 took advantage of the distraction and barreled towards for the alien, puddled fuel splashing against its tracks. "They're too slow," thought the President of General Assembly of Antigua and Barbuda. "They'll never make it." Sure enough, the alien war machine turned its weapons back towards the intrepid Greek Patton. At the very last second, just before it could open fire, a lit cigarette arced up and out of the tank's hatch and fell straight into the pool of alien fuel. "That'll never work," thought the Norwegian Minister of Children, Equality and Social Inclusion. "If you toss a lit match into a bucket of gasoline, it'll go out." The earth shook as the entire alien factory exploded. For a few moments, the leaders of the world held their breath, partially in anticipation, but mostly because the fumes from the burning alien fuel looked highly toxic. Then they gasped as the invincible alien machine strode out of the flames, all except the Myanmar Deputy Minister of Health and Sports, whose division of cancer research had just been fully funded, who merely smiled. Their battled human army was barely holding together. The Chileans had abandoned their Renaults. The Hondurans were down to their last axes. The Magisters had been shot out of the sky, and the engines of the last few jeepneys coughed as they turned and began to rumble away from the battle. Only the Mongolians fought on, diving in and out of the smoke and on their motorcycles. The Governor-General of the Bahamas lowered her eyes in despair. Suddenly, a volley of high-caliber shells smashed into the alien war machine, turning one of its arms into a mangled wreck. There, on the horizon, hundreds of tanks appeared. The Portuguese Prime Minister could make out their insignia, a red star with blue stripes. "Those magnificent bastards!" he cried. "It's the North Koreans!" The Minister of Canadian Heritage watched with glowing heart as the North Korean People's Army began its assault. "Now's our moment," she said, moving her arm in an arc. "Mounties, charge!" The moose-jawed detachment of the F Division of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which had been standing on guard in reserve, kicked their trusty steeds into a gallop. They gallantly rode into the flames with their Smith & Wessons held at the ready. Resolve stiffened. The shattered elements of the human army renewed their attacks. The leaders of the world watched in awe as the bits were blown off the alien titan until, with a great groan, it crumpled to the ground. Reining his horse back to a trot, the commander of the Mounties met the commander of the North Korean People's Army. Before the dead remains of the alien mothership, he dismounted. "Good thing you showed up, huh?" he said. "I guess this is over then." The Mountie extended his hand to his fellow commander, who shook it firmly. "It's not over yet," said the North Korean. Staring into the flames, the Mountie nodded sagely. "It's going to be a heck of a job to rebuild. Everything we used to rely on, it's gone. How do we even start?" The North Korean smiled. His entire education, indeed his entire life, had led him to standing here to offer humanity a perfect answer when all was gone, when there was no one to depend on except for each other. "My friend," he said, bursting with pride, "have you heard of Jush?" End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.